Thank you for staying with the Monday Report. So news of the lifting of the ban on genetically modified products was met with mixed reactions from stakeholders. While proponents say it is a solution to the perennial food shortage in the country, those opposed say that the ban was lifted without public consultation and proper research into the potential health risks. But as Mary Muoki now reports, farmers feel that they have been left out of the crucial discussion, with a spot check revealing that many of them are still grappling with myths, misinformation and outright disinformation about GMOs.
When Cabinet lifted the moratorium on genetically modified crops in September this year, the news sparked heated debate immediately, with the president defending the decision, saying that the lifting of the ban on genetically modified organisms is part of the government's response to the drought ravaging the country. Kenya struggles to feed its population of 55 million and has consistently had an annual deficit of maize staple. Imports fill the gap, but supply has come under unprecedented pressure in recent years from urbanization and skyrocketing prices of inputs like fertilizers. On the other end of the GMO debate, those opposed to the ban are up in arms against the decision, accusing the government of using underhand tactics.
We had Professor Kihumbu Thairo, who led a commission, the Thairo Commission, to look at whether Kenyans are ready to consume GMOs. Unfortunately, that report has never been publicly released, but we hear the report recommended that Kenyans were not ready to consume GMOs.
Food security problem is not a food production problem. It is not. We have leaders from the North Rift who are saying, no, wait. Can we buy what is there available?
But even as the government and those opposed to the lifting of the ban continue to engage in a war of words, the farmers at the grassroots level, those instrumental in implementing the directive, should the ban be lifted on importing and cultivating genetically modified crops, are still in the dark. Majority of them do not have any information on GMOs, and those that do are highly misinformed, raising the question about whether the government rushed to make a decision without first laying down the framework required to implement its directive.
Nimesikia GMO ni mahindi yenye imetoka ng'ambo, nataka inaletwa hapa Kenya. Sijui kama ni ya kukula ama ni ile mbegu.
Isaac Githinji is another farmer in Nandi County. He has also heard about GMOs in passing, but he thinks they are in relation to animal feed only and not fit for human consumption. He is also convinced that it is harmful to the ecosystem.
For us farmers, ours is to have consistent feed, enough feed for our cows throughout the year. So if GMO can sustain us to have enough food, sufficient food for our animals, we can plant GMO.
Githinji and Kebe's lack of information on the discussion revolving around GMO may point to the failure on the government in conducting public participation, leading up to the decision to lift the ban. Public participation is one of the national principles and values of governance and one of the key objectives of devolution. Article 174C envisions devolution as a tool that gives power of self-governance to the people and enhance their participation in the exercise of the powers of the state and in making decisions affecting them. The voice of the National Biosafety Authority, the body tasked with not only ensuring the safety of human health and adequate protection of the environment from harmful effects, but also tasked with facilitating public education, is critical.
Levels of public awareness and public education on this particular subject has been for a long time negatively influenced by negative reporting. I have done is to make an appeal for an enhanced facilitation to be able to go down to conduct public education.
The farmers echo this. Githinji is skeptical about the government doing due diligence before Cabinet resolved to lift the ban on genetically modified crops. He says genetically modified products may cause cancer.
Extension officers wakuje ground, wafunze each and every individual farmer on how to plant those things. I don't want to risk my life or to risk the life of others.
However, Dr. Francis Nangayo, the Senior Manager Policy and Regulatory Affairs at the African Agricultural Technology Foundation, says that claims that genetically modified crops cause cancer are unfounded and without any scientific basis.
The claims made in that paper were not resonating with the data that was contained in that paper. That paper was found totally wanting in terms of scientific evidence. Product, if you compare it with a non-GM, compositionally, element for element, they are substantially equivalent, except for the additional gene that you have intentionally introduced for the purpose that you require.
With the lifting of the ban, there are concerns that genetically modified crops are likely to contaminate non-GM crops through cross-pollination. This could lead to the loss of indigenous varieties of crops such as millet, sorghum, and other varieties that are grown in many parts of the country. In order to minimize the risk of that, it is recommended that buffer zones are put in place to make sure that genetically modified crops do not contaminate organic crops. Farmers, however, are not willing to do so.
Tuko na mashamba madogo, ni kidogo. So you try to minimize or maximize the available piece of land. So ukiniambia niacha 50 meters, ni kama nimeacha shamba kubwa.
Our farmers are smallholder farmers. They cannot afford to leave a 5-meter buffer zone around their farm to avoid cross-pollination. Our farmers thrive on mixed cropping.
Dr. Nangayo, however, opines that the risk of cross-pollination is very minimal and that genetically modified crops are a useful tool in fighting food insecurity. He says it enhances food production and maximizes yield by giving seeds the chance to fight against drought and pests.
So the fear about cross-pollination coming from organic people was over-dramatized. The extent of cross-pollination is negligible. The safety questions must be taken to NBA, and when NBA then returns a verdict that it is safe, then that is fine. And it is important that we believe in our own institutions.
The recent move by the government to lift the ban imposed on genetically modified products has given researchers hope of conducting national performance trials. The National Biosafety Authority last year issued a green light for open field farming of GMO cassava. Scientists at the Kenya Agricultural Livestock and Research Organization developed a variety that is resistant to the brown streak disease.
You don't have to introduce something from out, but they go into the gene, look at the various characteristics, decide which one to boost, which one to mute, which one to enhance, without anything from outside. And then that seed, when it's planted, when it's brought out there, it gives us the characteristics, the results that we want.
We are just waiting for the license from NEMA. We're doing the national performance trials, which will be carried out for 2 seasons. And after that, the variety committee and the variety select committee will then give it back, and we'll be able to give it to farmers and to seed entrepreneurs.
The African Agricultural Technology Foundation says it's awaiting the nod from regulatory authorities to roll out 3 varieties of the BT maize into the Kenyan market. Dr. Nangayo says trials conducted in various sites across the country showed the BT maize variety protects itself against insect pests.
In 2015, we had compiled sufficient data that BT maize therefore works very well in Kenya, protects an insect pest, 2 of them, stem borers. We expect that KEFIS will then soon pronounce itself that 3 varieties are now okayed for cultivation. But you asked a question.
On a national scale, growers in the country have something to smile about. Prior to the lifting of the ban on GM crops, the government had already allowed open cultivation of biotech cotton. And as from March next year, Kenya will join a growing list of other countries that will commercialize genetically modified maize, a boost to researchers at Kenya Agricultural and Livestock Research Organization, KALRO, and other scientists in the country who have spent time on development of GM technology in Kenya. Experts say that seed is the first link in food production, and it ought to firmly remain in the control of farmers to breed their own seeds. Some argue that lifting the ban will pave way for multinational corporations to control the seeds that farmers use to grow their own food, effectively taking away seed sovereignty from them. Mary Muoki, Citizen TV, Nairobi.